Hi, Kerri. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm excited to kind of dive into your specialty as far as what you're currently working with clients. And it's always super interesting to have someone who's not specifically IHP certified for us, because we love to see how other people are practicing, what they're doing, so on and so forth. So what I would love to do to start is, could you share with us what your kind of current practice looks like, your nutrition practice, and what you're currently doing with clients, kind of what capacity you work with them?
Sure. So I am a functional medicine nutritionist, and I working with clients both in a one-on-one capacity and in a group setting. I think my group program is particularly unique in that I provide and offer functional medicine testing along with the educational course I run and the community setting of a group program. So that's been really fun to take that from an idea into my head and create that as a reality.
Yes. Yeah. The community and like group setting oftentimes creates a whole lot of like camaraderie that like everybody's able to kind of, you lean on each other for support, or especially when it's, mostly women, which sometimes these programs do tend to be. It's really nice to kind of have that group support where it's just not like you're on your own little island working on this one thing by yourself. There's a lot of other people doing it with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the community that is formed with not only those who are currently in my group program, which is called the Anxiety Blueprint, but also alumni and the connections that alumni of that program form with each other has been really incredible.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. So if we could back it up just a little bit, because I love to get backstories as far as, is this something you've always been doing? Were you in another career beforehand? If so, kind of how did you naturally move from one to the other?
Yeah. So one of my mentors says that her overnight success took 10 years. And I feel very, very similar in my sort of evolution to the current state of my practice right now, and the knowledge that I have in the way in which I work with my clients and my patients. So my career actually started in national political campaigns and national politics. So I went to undergrad in DC and always knew I was going to go to school in DC, and always knew I was going to work in a political setting. And so it's just something I've known about myself since I was 12 years old. And much like a sort of quintessential DC story, it is truly a city and a town where if you're in the right place at the right time with the right people, your career can really take off from such a young age. And so my first internship was working for Senator John Kerry, who was the senator from Massachusetts at that time, and stayed in his office as an intern for about a year. And then just began working my way up to the amongst the political rungs. And back in about 2007, I was like, heard this rumbling that there was a senator from Illinois that was going to run for president of the United States. And I was like, I'm going to work for him. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make that happen. And so I found myself in 2007, 2008 in Iowa during the Iowa caucus for, at that time, Senator Barack Obama, and ended up working and on that campaign through the primaries into the presidential election, and then working for the DNC throughout that time. And that is when, like most people who get into this line of work, my health really started to deteriorate. And so at that time, this was now 2011, 2012. And so the world of functional medicine, the world of even naturopathic medicine was not like a thing. It didn't really exist in the way that it did. And so I was going through the ringer of the conventional path and just sort of being thrown one medication after the other, which then created its own side effects. And I was then being told, well, we can try another medication to to cover up those side effects. And I've always been an intuitive person, and I've always had this strong ability to manifest, but I didn't know at that time what manifestation was or what intuition was at all. And one day I just woke up and I decided something deep inside of me told me that I was never going to be healthy if I stayed in politics. And this was a sort of huge awakening. It was earth-shattering, considering all of my friends were involved in politics. I didn't know anyone else outside of the political community. Certainly no one talked about mental health at that time. Talking about mental health was basically a black stamp on, you and your ability to handle stress in a political realm. And it was the only thing I'd ever wanted to do with my career. And here I was living it, being at the top of my game. And I just got this deep knowing that I was never going to be able to be healthy if I stayed. So to make a long story short, one day I called my mom and said, I'm never going to be healthy if I stay. I have to get out. And she was like, okay, let's make it happen. And I packed up my car, left DC, and when I left, I thought I was going to go back. I had convinced myself that if I just took a less stressful job, and a less stressful job at that time was in the United States Senate, and a step down from the political realm, which in retrospect, now clear thinking, it's not a less stressful job at all. But at that time it was to me, and I'd convinced myself that if I took a less stressful job, I'd be okay. And so I had about a month to heal between when this new job would start. And I was like, okay, I have some family in Florida now. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to Florida for a month and I'm going to heal, and then I'll be back to brand new. And I never went back. Yeah.
Did you ever have a point in that process where you were like, oh my gosh, I haven't gone back yet, I was supposed to go back? Or did you just kind of evolution, did you just go from, oh my gosh, I'm healing, and now at this point, this is my mission, I don't belong there anymore type of a thing?
It was definitely not like an overnight switch. Okay. It was definitely a slow evolution in that So I was in Florida for a little while. I met up with this wonderful acupuncturist who was really helping me get to the root cause. And I didn't explain it, so I'll kind of go back that what was really so detrimental to my health at that time, and I was having daily and really crippling panic attacks. My anxiety was horrible. I was so fatigued that some days I physically couldn't get out of bed. And when you have a job that requires you to be at the top of your game and really mentally sharp, and you're struggling to get out of bed, it's not a great situation at all. And so I was working with an acupuncturist in Florida who was really helping me kind of put the pieces together, which were, poor thyroid health, poor gut health, nutrient deficiencies were really at the root of sort of everything that I was experiencing. And I had sort of reached the end of the end of the capacity of the work that I could do with her. I just felt like I was starting to feel better, but there was more done, and there was more to do. So I ended up coming back to Massachusetts. I grew up in the suburbs of Massachusetts, which was a whole nother identity crisis, because at that time I'd been gone for over a decade. I didn't have any friends here any longer. I knew one person in Boston besides my family, besides my parents, and that was my sister, who lived in Boston. And that's really the only person I knew. And so I originally came back here because it was really the only place that I could find doctors that practice both integrative and Western medicine at that time. And so I was sort of going down that path, and I still wasn't really happy with the answers that I was getting. And basically at one point, I just decided, I'm a really smart person. I'm going to figure this out for myself. And I'll just be honest that first getting into any type of integrative health or functional health or holistic health was very selfish, was only because at that time Like I wanted to heal. I wanted to heal the fastest way that I could. And I just wanted to get back to my life in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first couple of trainings that I did were just really to try and heal myself with no other motive. And then, as I'm sure others listening have had a similar experience, I'm sure you've had a similar experience. Once you start learning things, you start sharing things, and people start reaching out to you of like how you can help me. And so clients started reaching out in that capacity. So it was a real slow evolution to the current version of my practice. It was definitely not like I did one training and, that's it. And now I have a multiple six-figure practice in any way, shape, or form.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you kind of said, I'll be honest, it was, merely selfish and like my, pursuit for this information at first, because nobody's ever like said it quite that way. But so many practitioners, I think, start that way where, I mean, Dr. Cabral, who runs the IHP and the Equal Life, he always, says the same thing. He wasn't getting the answers he needed. And he was like, I'm going to figure this out myself. But he did, when he went on that journey, he said, if I figure this out, I'm going to share it with the world. And I think so many of us like can't help but to then take what we know, knowing that there's so many people out there that likely need the information, so many people that are suffering the way that we did with little answers, that then like, I have this all like, and now I'm going to help others.
Yeah.
And it's the evolution of it looks different for so many, but there's kind of this always like same underlying piece that is, I was in a really dark place. I got a little bit of help, but a majority of it I figured out myself. And now I have all of this knowledge and information, and it kind of feels like it's something I want to share with others.
Yeah. And I think the like thing that has helped me in this path to success, but I don't even know if it's success because it's always evolving, and that definition of success is always evolving, but it's always been doing the step that's right in front of me that feels the best for me right now. Mm-hmm. Even if I didn't actually know what that step was. So for example, this was like, back in the day, I think this was like 2013, 2014, which sounds so old, like crazy that was like back in the day at this point. But I still think it was yesterday, but it wasn't. And that the NPR station in Boston was doing this documentary series of people who were changing careers and young people just starting out and what that was. And I submitted my story and I was like, I want to be part of this series that you're doing. And I just got this, like, again, this intuitive hit to just submit my story. And I was like, there's no way that they'll want to listen to me. It's NPR in Boston. There's going to be, hundreds, if not thousands of submissions. And they got back to me and they were like, we absolutely want to feature your story. And it was literally in sharing that's my story and what I was doing now is how I got some of my first clients.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I think, again, another tone that we've always brought up on this show is that when clients know that they're working with a practitioner that's been there, there's automatically like this trust, this like vulnerability that kind of just like, settles in, and they're able to kind of relax into your expertise, your, passion, all of that, because they know like, okay, you've been there. Like you're not this perfect human being that's never struggled. And like you have all the answers. That can be super intimidating. And so having people listen to your story and be like, wow, she gave up like her quote dream job that she saw herself doing since she was 12 to now shift into this, right, can be super comforting for clients and just automatically attract them to your practice.
Yeah. And I think it's like people are smart and savvy, and, business is one thing. Like I'm the first to understand that there are marketing needs of a business, there's strategy behind a business and all of that. But I see today that so much of business strategy and so much of marketing strategy is just based on like almost telling people to follow this like formulaic process.
Mm.
And I think people on the receiving end are really smart, and they can see 1 million miles away when someone is being authentic and when they're just like following some sort of script. And I think it is when we can authentically share our stories in the right setting, in the right capacity for what people can and are ready to absorb, that that's where the authentic connections can really come through.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that even if they're not consciously aware of like, oh, this little business strategy that this person's using, oh, I'm sure they hired a business coach and they're doing this, this, and this to achieve that. There's still like a knowing, like an energetic sense of this is just a business strategy. And this is someone who actually truly loves what they do and they feel passionate about the outcome of their clients, right? Because there's a difference.
Yeah.
For sure. So what I would love to dive into next, because you brought up the name of your group program, which you said was Anxiety Blueprint, and we're kind of talking about what you've gone through yourself. And I would love to kind of tie that into what you believe to kind of be the most, and maybe this is what you discovered through your work with other practitioners and your own digging into things. What is the biggest connection to things like anxiety, panic, kind of those mood dysregulations that I think so many people, given the stressful lives that we all lead, it can kind of be? And is that something that you tie into this group program? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I work with clients to help them overcome their feelings of overwhelm and anxiety once and for all. So really looking at what the root cause of anxiety is for each of my individual clients and patients. And, what I've really distilled that down to is that anxiety can take a few different root causes, but primarily there's sort of four that I really see. And that it is nutrient deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, gut imbalances, and unprocessed emotions showing up as physical symptoms. That doesn't mean that blood sugar isn't tied to anxiety, or sleep disturbances aren't tied to anxiety, or, your circadian rhythm isn't tied to anxiety. That is all true. And I think those things can also filter into, the sort of buckets that I talked about. And so to me, I kind of looked at most of those four root causes and asked myself, what do they all have in common besides being a root cause of anxiety? And really looking at the fact that all systems in the body are also either regulated or affected by the gut. And that, to really completely solve hormonal imbalances, you need to have a healthy gut and make sure, right, at the basic level, phase 3 detoxification of estrogen is happening. Mm-hmm. At the basic level, to combat nutrient absorption or nutrient malabsorption, right? We need to make sure that our gut is functioning and that we're actually absorbing nutrients in our small intestine. And I started to think about, okay, emotion, and where does emotions actually show up for my clients? In a lot of ways, and it's in the gut, and then their gut gets affected. And so to me, it is hard to, and in the clients that I serve, and I don't want to make a sweeping generalization because I don't serve every single person on planet Earth with anxiety. That what I've seen by looking at the clients that I serve is that it's really hard to overcome anxiety without working on the gut first and without correcting the gut-brain axis. So that is actually where I start in my group program to come back and actually answer your question. Is that we start with a gut healing process, and we start with gut testing, and then we sort of move through the different levels and the different phases of healing anxiety, which then also includes focusing on nutrient deficiencies.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. We see all the time, women who have hormonal imbalances, and they'll run a hormone test through us. And yes, great. You have estrogen dominance and you have low progesterone and maybe your thyroid's off. And I say all the time, like we can fix those things, but it's still a green Band-Aid in a sense. It's a holistic Band-Aid on the symptomatic outcome, right, of the imbalance that the gut is probably causing, right? If you have gas, bloating issues that are gut related and all those hormonal issues, it's probably going to be really hard. And you're going to need to stay on those estrogen detoxifying supplements and the progesterone boosting things if you don't address the root cause. And sometimes the root cause fixing can kind of feel like a slow process, or it can feel like, why am I working on the gut when like I just want to get pregnant, or when I just want to fix my anxiety? It can kind of be this disconnect for people who don't know how massively intertwined it all is. And it can seem like a slow, approach to things, but it's the one way you said, like, you help people overcome it once and for all. It's the way to truly move from like the state of imbalance to a state of healing, and that you're not always chasing it with maybe a supplement or, something that's kind of just green Band-Aiding it, because the root cause is incredibly important.
Yeah. I mean, this often sometimes comes as a shock as I talk to other practitioners. And it may be a shock to hear from someone that, I have 10 years of different trainings. I've spent the last 3 years completing a training to be a registered dietitian. And I do not talk about nutrition in my group coaching program until week 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. Because I almost feel like sometimes what you're putting in your mouth doesn't matter if you're not sleeping well, if you're not managing your stress, if your circadian rhythm again is not synced up, and you're not understanding how your mindset plays a role in health. And to me, I always say that I'm like the most unpopular person on the internet because I talk about these foundational things that are so unsexy and, are so foundational, but they are so key to healing. And so that is a lot of what we do in my practice as well.
Yeah, I always say, like, don't put the cart in front of the horse. Yeah, because then you'll just spend your whole time managing that one thing. Yeah, sleep. And I love how you said like the most unsexy things, because the truth is like getting good sleep, right? Like if you prioritize that, you're giving up maybe things that, a specific lifestyle, or maybe you're lowering alcohol intake so that you can sleep better, or maybe you're wearing blue blocking glasses, like next to your boyfriend that you just met, 4 months ago, or like there's so many things that you kind of have to do lifestyle wise to optimize things like sleep, stress, and simply just lowering your general overall stress load, that it can kind of feel like, where's like where are the fireworks in this like program? But it's so true. If those things aren't set, it's like building that house on like sand, where it's just like, fine, you can build it, but it's probably going to slip away at some point.
Yeah. And something that I always ask clients who complete my group program, and I know we're focusing on my group program, but I do also see clients in a one-on-one. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. But I always ask clients who graduate from my group coaching program, like what the one piece of advice they would give to someone just starting the program. And the biggest thing I hear is like, trust the process. It will change your life. And it's like, and it's incredible to hear that from a practitioner. And I just want to reiterate, it wasn't like I woke up one day and I was like, this is the method that I'm going to use in any way, shape, or form. It was really, looking at clients that I work with and sort of analyzing the data and figuring out, the best way, tweaking things, moving things. And so, I think as a whole, and, this is a generalized sweeping statement, but I think as a whole in the functional medicine and the functional nutrition spaces, that we've actually really gotten away from the foundations and the fundamentals of health, because we know that clients have been struggling for so long, and we want to really help them and kind of dive in with some of the more heavy hitters. But I've really truly found that some of those foundations they take a little bit longer, but they can really move the needle as well.
Yes. Yeah. And move the needle in a lasting way.
Yeah.
They take longer to kind of see those like, wow, this has really changed kind of results, but they take you off that hamster wheel of like constantly chasing symptom after symptom. And that's
Yeah.
what I always try to get across to clients is this won't be an overnight change, but it also won't be that you are all of a sudden dealing with something, new in 2 months, because a lot of people, a lot of clients, I think they're used to like playing whack-a-mole. It's like, okay, you get that mole down and now like this new symptom came up and like, how do we get that down? But that kind of comes when you're just like piecemealing, like, okay, deal with estrogen dominance or dealing with, this one thing over here. But when the foundation is set, that is less likely to happen for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So I would love to know kind of if there was one piece of advice, you brought that up, but this is usually a question that I ask kind of to someone. So we talk to coaches all the time, nutritionists, lots of different practitioners, chiropractors, people that have moved from unconventional or, more conventional jobs, bankers, you name it. I interviewed a gentleman who was in construction and he, became an IHP and now he's coaching clients. So very unconnected careers. And if somebody's listening and they're kind of in a position where they're like, I think I am in a job that's maybe going to keep me unwell to some degree, right? Like maybe stress is incredibly high and they're thinking about like kind of making a switch. Do you have some sort of like one little piece of advice that you would give someone either maybe who's already made the switch and is hearing you? Because I think a point that you've tried to make is like, this is not an overnight success. And so even though you knew you were going to kind of make the switch, where you are now is not where you were, 8 years ago. What would be like a piece of advice to a newer coach or a new practitioner?
So the part of my story that I didn't share is that after I started some of these trainings, either like holistic health coaching, or I've also studied yoga and Ayurveda and, numerous trainings and functional medicine nutrition as well, is that I actually took a marketing job. And that, so I was seeing clients on the side, I was doing more trainings and I worked full time. And it wasn't until 4 years ago now that I left my full-time job because I went back to school full-time and my practice was in a place where it could sustain me while I was also going back to school full-time. And so, and that's what felt right to me. So, I've kind of had both experiences where I jumped off the cliff and just sort of left politics. Although I don't know if I would have left without having a job lined up, which I didn't end up taking, but that still felt like a safety net to me. But so I've had the experience of jumping off the cliff, but then I've also had the experience of being in a job that was fine, that I was good at, didn't light me up. I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to do long-term, but it gave me the funds to not have pressure on my practice. It gave me the funds to go do whatever training I wanted to and dabble in different areas and be able to to explore different areas and facets of health. And so I think my best piece of advice is like, your journey doesn't have to look like someone else's. Like the only person that you have to answer to is yourself. And you just need to be okay with the decisions that you are making. And they really need to feel good to your nervous system. And I think we forget about nervous system regulation in business decisions, like putting ourselves in a position where our nervous system is completely dysregulated because there's so much pressure on us to succeed. Like, is not going to help. It's certainly not going to help you, but it's certainly not going to help any of your clients either. And so I think, just really being able to tune into what feels good for you at this moment, and then having the courage to walk that path and make that step. And it looks so different for everyone. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Having that little bridge can sometimes take the pressure Yeah, and we talk a whole lot about nervous system. Like, we were talking about it earlier. Like, somebody who's stressed, you're not going to come across as this relaxed, open, passionate practitioner ready to help and serve clients, right? You're going to come across as like this rigid, oh my God, I need to make this sale, because if I don't, how am I going to pay my rent type of a business owner? And there's a huge shift in that. Both energetically for what the client will sense, but also like how good it feels to you. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great piece of advice, because it doesn't have to be this linear process. And we've, interviewed so many people who like, they'll take like a job at Whole Foods working in like the whole body section, because that like just feels good. And it's a way for them to kind of have just a semi-steady income and take like some of the pressure off while they're starting their business. And they're not feeling so, so much stress to do it perfectly right off the bat. And it usually, like you said, if it feels good to your nervous system, will kind of probably lead to a better outcome.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the other thing that I really try and embody, which is not easy, and I never want to come across as like someone who has it all figured out, because like I'm still learning every single day. And I think within that too is like finding a strong community of other practitioners who are doing what you are doing and can help support you in that journey. That's been really, really pivotal to me. But something I try and really embody is that I'm not tied to this working out perfectly. I'm not tied to this having to work out. I love what I do. I love my practice. I love my clients. And I think it is the greatest honor and privilege to be able to show up and do the work that I do every single day. But if there's another calling, if there is another evolution of what I'm doing now, I want to remain open to that. And I think that we can get really, and I've certainly been there in the past. So, guilty, and like the highest degree right here is like, I think we get so tied to an outcome, and we get so tied to things having to be a certain way. And I think that can become at our own detriment, because another opportunity might need to come through, or another evolution may need to come through. And if we hold so tightly to what our current reality looks like, or something working out, we just block that from coming through. And so something that is work, and something that I'm trying to really work on is not being really attached to what the current version of my practice is.
Yeah. The attachment overall to, what we hold tightly to typically, tends to have a different energy. So yeah, I completely agree. If someone's listening to our chat and kind of wants to find out more about either your group program or find you on social media, can you kind of give us all of the places that you might show up? So social media, a website.
Yeah.
And your group program again.
So I'm pretty active on Instagram. It is just my name at Kerri Axelrod. That's Kerri. My last name is Axelrod, Axelrod. Then my website is just my name, kerriaxelrod.com. So you can find me in both of those places. I always love a good voice memo on Instagram. So if you are listening and you want to shoot me over a voice memo in my DMs, I would love to hear from you.
Okay. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast. It was so fun getting to know you and chatting, and I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom with our listeners. I think it's been incredibly valuable.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kerri. We'll talk soon.